So basically, if you look at the foundation for advancing science and technology in India, of which FAST India is the acronym, this is basically a non-profit organization of excellence, which is dedicated to building, both capacity as well as advancing policy solutions, that can foster some kind of a scientific inquiry and research, and in some form, facilitate the creation and dissemination as well as translation of new scientific knowledge in India. We do it in multiple ways. We've been trying to do it. It's still a new organization. We basically, if you look at the entire science and technology landscape in the country, it does need some transformation. Everybody accepts that. So it's very important to get the necessary buy-in, working very closely with the government. The idea is to revitalize the entire science and technology, and especially the research ecosystem in the country. It could be done in a variety of ways to the best of our understanding. One is, of course, looking at capacity building. How do you develop some meaningful interventions for capacity building in science and technology institutions, in labs, and how do we do it? We try to leverage the global best practices, look at what would apply to India, what won't apply. And we do it, in conjunction with, the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, as well as the Education Ministry, as well as various science and technology ministries, departments. The other valuable vehicle that we have is of policy initiatives. How do we conceive some of these policy initiatives? Not in isolation within FAST, but through engagement with a lot of science leaders in India and abroad, as to what kind of reforms are needed in the science and technology ecosystem, which would really foster research. And our attempt would be to take up more advocacy around them, and also for specific reforms, assist the governments, largely the federal government, to a limited extent, the state government, with the conceptualization, drafting, enactment, and some kind of a rendering implementation assistance during the rollout phase of the reform. That is our intent. And, and of course, to facilitate dissemination of scientific knowledge and create a temper for science and technology in India, for research to really thrive, science and technology research to really thrive in our country. And how do we emerge as a thought leader? FAST India emerges as a thought leader, in science in India, and develop a narrative for its proliferation countrywide through science communication in India. Science Festival is actually a very, very important, it's a flagship event of FAST India. And we are also trying to assist some of the science and technology ministries and institutions, as to how they could lay down, their science communication portfolio, so that, science and technology, things around STEM reach a wider audience, and more and more younger minds in the country are enthused about it for taking it up, not only during their education, as well as later for careers in research, So it's and of course also our intent is to engage very effectively with the industry, because barring a few isolated examples here and there, industry also does not support research as much as it should, kind of a thing. So that's another intent that we have to take up. FAST India, in terms of its promoters, the two of them, Varun, you've already met, who has been a successful startup. And has been a researcher. He studied at MIT. And, more than anything else, I think his book that he talked about when he was addressing, that in a way became, a pivot around which, FAST India was born. And Ashish Dhawan, who's a private equity investor turned philanthropist. He's, you all know him as the chairperson of Ashoka University, which is a leading liberal arts university in India, as well as the chairperson of Central Square Foundation. And he's equally passionate as Varun about promoting science and technology in India. And, we have a whole lot of, advisors like Luis Miranda, of the Center for Civil Society, Dr. Sanjay Sharma from MIT, Vijay Chandru, who's a computer scientist, Venkatesh Narayan Murthy from Harvard, Dr. Swaminathan Shivaram from the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Thomas Barlow from Australia, who's advisor on science and technology research, and Chris Gopalakrishnan, one of the co-founders of Infosys, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, who's incidentally also a panelist this evening for this session from CMC Vellore. Dr. Samir Brahmachari, who is the former DG of CSIR, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw. We all know about the work her company has done in the biotechnology space. So I think I can go on and on, but looking at respecting the time, I think it's important to introduce the topic that we have for the panel discussion starting in a short while. We welcome all the panelists on a very, very important topic as to how do we lay down the foundation for next gen in STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in India, and it applies to education as well as for subsequent careers in science and technology. And who could have been a better person than Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, as a panelist for this session. We also all know him as the PSA, but he was also the Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, Government of India earlier. He was also the Director of National Center for Biological Sciences of the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR. As well as for some time, he headed DBT's Institute of Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine. He has made huge contribution in science, largely as a developmental biologist, and now he's at the helm of affairs of science and technology in the country, because bulk of science and technology in our country happens in government labs. He's also the fellow of the Indian National Science Academy and the Indian Academy of Sciences. And as a matter of fact, he's the only...
into our panel discussion time.
Yeah, I know, Dr. Raghavan. I've tried to be as brief as possible. Otherwise, the entire panel discussion time would be taken away by introducing such an illustrious team of, panelists. And he has been, elected as the only Indian, as a matter of fact, to be elected as an associate member of the European Molecular Biology Organization.
Not true anymore.
I said, that's and he was also elected a fellow of the Royal Society. A lot of, I will not even attempt to read his honors and awards that he has gone, but some of the important ones are the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, Infosys, Prize for Life Sciences, as well as Padma Shri in the year 2013 for his immense contribution to nation building through science and technology. Not in any particular order, let me introduce Dr. Gagandeep Kang to you, who's also on our advisory board of FAST India. She's a microbiologist as well as a virologist and a professor of gastrointestinal sciences at CMC Vellore. She has been a leading practitioner and her research has focused on viral infections in children and testing of rotaviral vaccines, Like Dr. Raghavan, she has also been the Infosys Life Sciences Prize winner. And her contribution has been huge in understanding the natural history of rotavirus and other diseases which are of infectious nature. She was the first woman to be elected to as the fellow of the Royal Society. And she co-authored the book, which is called Till We Win, India's Fight Against the COVID-19 Pandemic. And as most of you would have seen, she was one of the most prominent scientists in the country, who was engaging regularly with the media and public at large, not just to spread knowledge, which was so critical during the pandemic, which still is, as well as to fight misinformation. So welcome, Dr. Gagandeep Kang. May I request all the panelists to switch on, their videos as well, Wonderful. Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan is the CEO of DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. She is very rich research experience in leadership positions for over 25 years, at the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad. Her focus has been on muscle stem cells, and she was also involved in setting up a DBT's Institute for Stem Cell Science and Regenerative Medicine in Bangalore. And her research focus has been on molecular mechanisms by which dormancy and quiescence contributes to adults' stem cell function and skeletal muscle repair. Then let me introduce Dr. Karishma Akashic to you. Dr. Karishma Akashic is a doctor, is a physician turned scientist, and she did her MD in clinical microbiology from AFMC Pune. And as a doctor, she chose the career of a researcher and did her PhD in molecular genetics and microbiology from University of Texas, Austin, where she also taught for some time. And a few years ago, she returned to India as a Ramalinga Swami Fellow and set up, her own research group at the University of Pune. And her theme of research has been on human relevant infection biology that aims to bridge the gap between studying infectious disease models in mice and application of such research in human beings. And more interestingly, she's a co-founder of a talk from a science communication perspective a talk to be co-founder of Talk to a Scientist, which is one of a kind interactive weekly webinar-based outreach platform for igniting young minds towards science and technology in India. So thank you, Dr. Karishma. And last but not the least is Dr. Manu Avasti, who's a PhD from University of Utah, and earlier he did his BTech from Computer Science in IT BHU, which is now IIT BHU Varanasi. He teaches at Ashoka University now. Before that, he was at IIT Gandhinagar. He was teaching computer science there. He has been with the Micron's Architecture Definition Group and also the Samsung's Memory Solution Lab in California. And with a lot of work that he has done in next-gen memory as well as storage devices and systems, There are lots of fellowships he has got. The list is long. But, I think more importantly for us, he has been championing the cause of capacity building in STEM. And very well known for creating, memes, for social media. So welcome, Dr. Manu Avasti. I won't take a lot of time. As I introduced the topic to you, very, very clearly, the choice we have that, through a prism of timelessness, we can reiterate, as to what ails our STEM education as well as research landscape in the country. But I won't do that because I essentially see the glass not as half empty, but as half full. There's a lot of positive, energy in India as a country and our land and our science and technology landscape. If you look at, we are by PPP, the third largest economy in the world. In absolute terms, by nominal GDP, we're the sixth largest economy. Surely a big enough science and base to support science and technology. A base of 1,000 universities, 10,000 science colleges, 15 lakh schools, ISC, 23 IITs, 31 NITs, 7 ICERs. There is no dearth for careers in serious research in India. We have the world's third largest base of startups, where also a lot of cutting edge innovation is happening, including 53 unicorns, which we have, who now have the capacity to invest in research big time. Huge set of government labs, 38 CSIR labs, 64 ICR labs, 50 DRDO labs, and almost 21 ISRO centers, 5 atomic energy centers. I mean, the list is long. If at all we run these bodies, these institutes and labs on global standards, it could surely catapult India's science and technology research throughput to a much, much higher achievement trajectory for the country, solving lots of challenges for the country, which are relevant to the country yet not solved. We have 86% tele-density, 54% smartphone penetration, and almost 80 crore internet users. These are all they augur very well for adoption of technology, as we saw during the COVID time, and also our research, our homegrown vaccines. NEP the new education policy 2020 has huge opportunities that as it has laid the focus on only research universities, as well as the formation of National Research Foundation with an outlay of 50,000 crores spread over 5 years. I see it as a never before opportunity to commence the transformation of science and technology research in our country. Anywhere you look at, 12 to 15% of scientists in the US and UK are immigrants from India, first generation immigrants from India. Indian students form the second highest population of students in countries like US, UK, and Singapore, and so on and so forth. Not just Microsoft and Google, almost half of the top 20 tech giants in the world, they are led by people of Indian origin, and not, whose parents had migrated, who did their first degree in India and then went for their master's abroad and then started working. So I see, as a huge opportunity, for this kind of a reform to happen in our country. And my first question to Dr. Vijay Raghavan is essentially, I see it as, as a very exciting time for sciences in India to thrive. Do you agree with it? If yes, then why? And if not, then why, Dr. Raghavan? Who could be a better person in the country to answer that?
Thank you, Jayant, for delivering my talk. Let me just give some concluding remarks. The challenges we face, despite all these enormous advantages, are such that unless we grasp them and deal with them soon, we will let opportunities slip and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. What are our challenges? And you sort of detailed them out. I won't repeat that. You put them in terms of opportunities. Let me put them in terms of imperatives. Today, we have within India a France and a Germany in terms of science, technology, engineering, and medicine, and some of the most difficult, lowest or middle income countries in terms of science and technology. So we have this combination. This combination is there in an interesting manner. It is in a salt and pepper manner distributed all over the country. And if you look at the pepper as our top institutions, you have them all over the country, all the labs you mentioned. Adjacent to them, walking distance, are all our other universities, where Varun mentioned, for example, that you don't read a research paper as an undergraduate. So you have the salt and pepper situation, and no matter how much water you pour on the system, the pepper doesn't dissolve and merge with the salt. You needed that pepper formation to build excellence. Some amount of isolation is good to build excellence. But now there needs to be a way by which we can break that excellence. So in terms of, sorry, not excellence, my apologies. We can break that barrier, that isolation which is there, which you use to build excellence. And therefore, what you need is a way by which these research labs are integrated with our university system, both geographically and thematically. For that, I would say we should have a situation beginning soon from about 10 to 20% of their funding. But after that, about 70% of their funding should be spent in the research ecosystem with their units embedded in their university system. So that's one about mixing labs and universities. The second point is about our research institutions right now. While they indeed have extraordinary competence, there is a big challenge in their not having institutional comprehension. In other words, they are a collection of competences like a real high quality termite hill, but the comprehension of the organization of that hill is not there. In some ways, it's a good thing. You don't want a top-down comprehension thrust on institutions saying that this is what you will do. Then you don't perform. The other extreme is if everyone has a comprehension of what needs to be done at their individual researcher level, then you're really talking about a university environment and not a research institution environment. So somehow you need to have the focus and drive of our research institutions. And I use examples like the Lawrence Berkeley labs or the Bell labs and so on. Each have their strengths and weaknesses, but we need to get that ability into our research institutions while partnering with the ecosystem. Now, this combination of linking our institutions with the broader ecosystem and with the institutional transformation internally itself is eminently feasible. It requires substantial will from within. And if it doesn't get resolved from within, it needlessly gets resolved in a clunky manner from outside. So that's the top priority for all of our scientists, I would say. The second priority for this salt and pepper to mix is having all our education at the higher level bilingual. You should be able to listen to and this is a big challenge in national institutions. You should be able to listen to a talk in any language of your choice in class and read a textbook bilingually in English and any other language. If you're not listening to a talk in your language, at least have a speech to text translation in your language available. And this is increasingly becoming feasible at a mind-boggling pace. And while you will lose nuances, for example, if you're listening to Shakespeare or Anna Karenina, a literal translation by a computer is no good. But for many other aspects, functionally, it can, be very valuable. Primarily, it gives you the power of abstraction, which you have in your own language, and you lose if you have to master another language. If you have to master another language to do well, many people do it. They're very talented or driven, but you're really shutting off the opportunity for a girl in Chhattisgarh to become a gravitational astronomer. And that is not right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan, for some very useful ideas around that. May I now move to Dr. Gagandeep, Kang, and before, just a request to all panelists, let me suggest that, towards the end, if you could just list down 2 or 3 top ideas, top of the mind ideas that you have. What's your wish list for STEM, both education and from a research landscape perspective, to change in foreseeable future? If you have your wish list ready, that be common question. I would ask all the panelists towards the end of the panel discussion. So, Dr. Kang, the simple question that I have to you is that how we as a nation are doing to build the capacity in STEM. Do you see us moving in the right direction, both in education and careers? And what do you see as some top, hits as well as misses?
So I think if we think about what has worked well, the islands of excellence, the pepper that Dr. Vijay Raghavan talked about, has worked reasonably well. If you look at what the IITs produce, what the organization that Jyotsna is heading produces, these are really outstanding people across a range of disciplines. But the problem really is, once you're finished with your IITs, not so much for the India Alliance, which has a continuum of support for people if they are deserving, where do you go? And what is the environment that you are offered then? I don't think it's an accident that 10 out of the top 20 tech companies in the world are headed by Indians. Because we are 1/6 of the world's population. We give people that study at the best institutions a leg up in terms of their training. And if you succeed in India, the competition to get into these institutions is incredible. If you succeed in India, you're likely to succeed anywhere in the world, because the competition at least post-undergraduate level is heaviest in India. So I think when we think about what we want to do to keep our best and brightest in India, we need to think about the environment that we have for them, what we create as enabling mechanisms. And to me, one of the biggest things that we don't recognize is how much time is wasted in India. So if you look at a scientific career in India, I don't think anyone does time motion studies for this. How much is spent on science? How much is spent on bureaucracy? And what else, how does that compare with the rest of the world? There are some institutions that take the burden of administration and on themselves, create supportive structures, but those, even among the pepper, are few and far between. So I think thinking about that and making sure that we evaluate what the pain points are and what we need to do to address them is absolutely critical. If we think about resources, globally, the government is the largest investor in research. You do have a much larger proportion of R&D investment that happens from companies or industry, but it's still government that funds the most. And I think benchmarking where we are and following through on that is absolutely critical. And the benchmark should include how we facilitate industry to also invest in research. So there are some hits that have resulted in exports, some hits that have resulted in excellence within the country, some institutions that have really attracted the best back. But at the moment, a lot more misses, and doing an evaluation of why these misses exist would be very helpful.
So thank you, Dr. Kang. I really liked, especially your suggestion that, do we do a time and motion study for, the throughput of a scientist, how much of time they spend on core science and technology and how much on the bureaucracy, and how do we cut the bureaucracy element and increase their productive time on scientific research. Thank you. May I now go to, Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan. So drawing from your experiences, Jyotsna, what do you see as some of the critical challenges in the path of doing high quality science research in India, Jyotsna? You have to unmute, Jyotsna.
I recognize that. Hi, thank you for having me on the panel. There are many challenges, but many paths towards what you consider high quality research. So I think, the fact is we have these wonderful institutions which have capacities for doing research in exploring the world around us. But we also have a large variety of places where there are people who are instinctively capable of doing research at those high levels, but simply don't have the enablement to be able to get there. And I think this is a big challenge, because while one wants to ensure that the elite institutions which are world-class exist, and the pepper that Vijay was talking about, how does one also ensure that there is an egalitarian way to spread the capability for being able to access a path to research? I think it's very difficult. One possible way is that, among the programs that we fund, which are these essentially funding the best and the brightest, is to ensure that you also have built in as part of the funding funds that enable outreach to programs that are less well funded. And this means actually reaching out to the people around you in universities and other organizations around you. And, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I think what we seem to also lack, in addition to we have large amounts of funds which are coming in from the government as well as from private sources for a variety of programs. But perhaps what we need is a change of attitude as well. And one of the things that I think we seem to focus on is the notion of success as this linear path. I think that success is bundled in with the ability to recognize failure and the lessons of failure. And we need some ability to have the freedom to fail in order to work through those things. And I think young people in particular are, not sufficiently appreciated for these abilities to work through failure, because our system is not forgiving of those, of the notion of failure. So I think we need to have a change in attitude in addition to all of the programs that we, are enabling at multiple different levels, right? Because that, at the end of the day, that's what's going to allow those programs to be successful and implementable. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jyotsna. Some very useful inputs, and especially I liked your comment that, our system is not engineered to accept failure. As they say, sweet are the uses of adversity. And there's a huge amount of learning from failures. Lessons learned teach you far more than the best practices, picked up from elsewhere. But we as a system we have to have enough window for accepting failures and actually encouraging them that, yes, that's a part of the process. Not every intervention can be successful. Thank you. And so over to, Dr. Manu Avasti. My question to you is, Dr. Kang also mentioned that, IITs have such a rigorous selection process. And, if you have, been able to crack that, you can perhaps get into any institution or do wonders anywhere in the world. But it's also true if you look at IITs, the best of breed students that IITs attract are in the undergrad. Master students are a few notches lower than undergrad students the IITs attract, and PhD students are even several notches below the master students. So how do you what to your mind we as a country need to do that we retain that talent and even at the master's level and the doctoral level and even the postdoctoral level we keep those students within, we create the right system, the right ecosystem, the right environment for research to thrive. What needs to be done to your mind, Dr. Manu? Since you're also a product of IIT system like Dr. Raghavan.
All right. Thanks, Jayant, for having me on. So let me just, since you mentioned IITs, let me just quickly comment on the fact that the undergraduate students, the undergraduate population in the IITs is a very, very tiny fraction of the total undergraduate population in India, right? So, of course, they get the best possible education, they get the best possible resources, and that is also a function of the kind of support that the institutions themselves get from multiple quarters, which essentially probably 95% of the students don't get, right? Overall IITs only have 18,000 or so undergraduate students that they take in every year, which is basically, if you look at the larger context of the country, this is a very, very tiny fraction, right? So that's point one. The other point that you mentioned about retaining students back in India at both the master's, the doctoral, and the postdoctoral level, essentially goes back to one belief that I have, right? If you look at research that has been done, all the projects, all the funding aside, research is done by people. right? I mean, it's the PhD students, it's the postdoctoral fellows, it's the staff scientists who actually do all the research that is ever done, not just in India, everywhere else, right? And then building a good research ecosystem essentially boils down to taking care of people who are actually doing the research, right? And that includes academics, that includes faculty, that includes principal investigators as various research labs, so on and so forth, right? So, so the idea here is that whatever it is that we do, irrespective of how much money the government puts in, how much money the industry pours in, until unless we are, as a country, as a conglomerate of all the academic institutions are there, we're not able to take, as long as we are able to take care of these students, for example, PhD students, paying them a living wage, or paying their stipends on time, for example. I mean, that is a big thing that is that has essentially not been solved yet. So again, the point is that we need the funding. Coming back to funding as well, to some extent, we sort of need to be in a mode where we are throwing money at the problem for a significant amount of time at least, right? And this is essentially what China has done over the past 20, 25 years, where they have just invested so much money into building up their institutions. And this is not just the pepper higher tier institutions that Dr. Raghavan was talking about, but essentially throughout the pyramid, tier 2, tier 3, whoever else, they have just poured in money to build infrastructure across the pyramid and kind of brought in people at all levels, right? So that has something that has not just happened in India as of yet. I mean, although the amount of funding that is coming from government sources, from the industry, everything has been increasing over time, it has not been able to match the level at which, people don't have to sort of worry too much about, hiring people or paying their salaries on time and so on and so forth, right? So to some extent, all this boils down to is essentially making sure that people who do the research, people, who are faculty, who are staff, who are PhD students, staff scientists, are taken well care of. And that requires changes at multiple levels. You have to put more money into the system. You have to make sure that there is institutional accountability from the funding agencies as well as the actual institutions where these people are attached to, so that they're, things like salaries are getting paid on time, things like release of grants by various funding agencies is made on time, so that these salaries can essentially be paid on time, right? So I personally know of so many cases where people who do want to do good research and stay in India have decided to not do it because of these very basic things that are not being done. And you can't really blame them for taking, decisions that they take them outside of the country.
Thank you, Manu. Very useful. And many of these problems that you narrated are solvable problems. They are not rocket science. Why can't we release the stipend of research scholars on time? Why can't we, even the grant money, why is it that, lab after lab complains that, bulk of that money comes during part of the year and then becomes a huge cycle, huge challenge, how to meet the working capital requirements and things like that. We could surely do corrections because the money exists in the system, right? If it didn't exist, how are eventually the payments made? So it's not a question of non-availability of funds, but these are clearly solvable problems. Thank you, Manu, for very, very useful inputs. Now I switch to Dr. Karishma Akashic. Since this platform that you runs, Talk to a Scientist, share with you in the earlier two ISFs, based on the surveys that we did, majority of the students, especially the science and technology students, they said that they are meeting a scientist for the first time in their lives, through India Science Festival. First time, can you imagine? Majority of them, and these scientists can inspire young minds, can ignite their minds big time, So what we as a nation can do to institutionalize science communications, especially since your initiative is there, therefore leaving aside all other questions, parking them somewhere, I'll request Karishma, you to focus on that.
Thank you, Jayant. But I would mention a few points in continuation with what the four panelists have spoken. I think
all
of this could come under, before I talk of my passion project, which is Talk to a Scientist. I'm also a scientist in my day job. So I think I will comment a little bit about what's been spoken before. I think all of this comes under ease of doing research. In India, we talk a lot about ease of doing business, but administrative processes, paperwork, fellowships being paid on time, positions being created, positions being renewed, all of this comes under ease of doing research, which we have to prioritize and focus yesterday, if needed, in the Indian science community. We cannot expect thought-provoking science, pondering questions when somebody is worried about their next fellowship payment going through at student level. At early career researcher level, we really can't expect high output science when we are worried about our extensions, when we are worried about whether grants will come through. So for this one thing, I think we can look to see systems that have solved it and try and, replicate those processes that have managed to get disbursals out on time, disbursals without enormous amount of paperwork involved. Because these are pain points, like what Gagandeep mentioned. These are pain points in Indian science, which are unsolved, unfortunately. The other aspect to doing science in India is the problem of missing personnel. We simply haven't invested in building in what I see as two groups of people. One is the postdoc community, who are extremely well trained, and we want to hold them back. While I'm a beneficiary of the Ramalinga Swami project, I think taking it further is, why don't we hold them back in India? So we don't have a postdoc community sufficiently supported, and we don't have staff scientists in India sufficiently supported to help larger labs actually focus on the science, and while they take care of many other technical aspects. So if India Alliance can look at programs that would specifically support these, what I would call missing personnel in Indian science, it would be game-changing as early career researchers set up their establishments. All right, I think with that, I'll come to Talk to a Scientist. So it was a pandemic project, a passion project. We intended to go to schools. That never happened because of March 2020. We all know what happened after that. We decided to turn it online. So digital connectivity in the last 2 years has been forced on us, but it's also provided unprecedented opportunities for scientists to basically reach out to communities. And I would say there are no excuses left anymore. Not only because the pandemic has made people look to scientists for answers and made scientists the center of this global national discussion on dealing with the pandemic, but also because now we have digital tools with which we can engage. What I think we did get the India Bioscience Outreach Grant, and I also know that India Alliance supports a lot of outreach initiatives, which was tremendous, because if not for the IOG, the outreach grant, this money would basically have gone from our pockets. We would have happily done it anyway, but IOG gave us the platform. It gave us the formal structure to build this outreach program. What I think is missing when I talk to my colleagues, and this would be my last point here, is I think there is no value or assessment of one's time spent on these activities. If it is not at some honest level, when everyone wants promotions, grants, awards, move up the ladder, the academic ladder, there aren't enough systems in place to value and appreciate time spent on this. And if that can be built into promotions and assessments, it would definitely allow a lot of early career researchers to basically say, look, I'm passionate about doing it, but it shouldn't affect my career path, because finally that puts the bread on the table.
Yeah. Thank you, Karishma. I really appreciate your thoughts, especially on improving ease of doing research on the lines of ease of doing business. Let me tell you that Fast India is making every endeavor. We are yet to start work on that, let me confess, but it's our intention that, could we develop that into an indices, have measurements in place, if the ease of doing research in India has to improve. That's what and wonderful ideas, these are practically, what I would like to ask all panelists at the end, that what are the top 2, top 3 ideas? You said the missing layer of staff scientists and of course the postdoc community. These are big gaps. Thank you for these wonderful suggestions. So now over to Dr. Vijay Raghavan, the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India. Since I know for sure that, sir, you are a reformer at heart, Therefore, I wanted to ask you the next question. See, I mean, if you look at historically, our universities and our science and technology labs and institutions evolved in a certain manner for some reasons, best known to our founding fathers. They were always created into separate universes, unlike many other countries in the US and UK. Labs and these scientific institutions, most of them, if not all, they are a part of the university ecosystem itself. In our country, for some reason, we created them as two independent entities. And therefore, over a period of time, we have created a situation where they hardly talk to each other, at a time when the research all over the world is becoming more cross-domain, more interdisciplinary, we have created so many, pockets, isolated pockets in the country. I'm aware of some of the initiatives you have taken to create geography clusters, but is there any other way of bringing, these the institutions of higher learning and scientific research together closely for us to be able to solve the critical problems which we as a country face? Over to you, Dr. Raghavan.
Thank you, Jayant. Let me address this problem in two components, but first comment on some of the aspects which you have discussed earlier. The obvious inefficiencies in resources reaching their targets in a steady manner is a problem which our research agencies need to sort out, and they're grappling with it, and I hope that gets done. That's very important. But the other side of it is also important, may not be equally important, but still very important, which is our institutions, universities or research institutions, need to get their act together. They are not administratively efficient in most places and don't look at the institution and its directions. They look upon themselves as post people who will take an individual investigator's problem and pass it on and pass on the response. So if there is a certain momentum in our institutional structure to take institutional responsibility, then this will also help that change. Why is this related to the question you asked? The initial condition when universities were there and research institutions were being started or new universities came up, had these kinds of structures proximal to each other. They worked very closely with each other. I don't have time now to go into that, but for example, the history of organic chemistry in the country is a very interesting one, looking at the university system, how closely it is tied to the National Chemical Laboratory, the Institute for Chemical Technology, IIT Kanpur, universities, Bombay University's department. They were close to each other. They went by again because of this administrative laziness in not attending to connectivity. Not just that there was a government plan to keep them separate and fund one and not the other. The drive and the push from the university sector to be at the forefront collapsed for a variety of reasons which we need to address now. Similarly, the research institutions, not seeing the universities as competition, became the best person in town. So you were top laboratory in house casts in the world, but those were your measures. Your measures were all local. Now this has to change, and I think a way by which we can change this, for example, in Hyderabad, there are about 40 central government research institutions and universities. If they came together and functioned seamlessly as one, if a student could go from any lab to any university and talk to anyone and have a guide and do any course, while preserving institutional autonomy, this would be transformative overnight. But getting these people to work together is a big challenge. Everyone, without exception, wants change as long as it doesn't happen. The moment you talk about your own institution and say, shall we do this? No, I know how to reform CSIR or ICAR, but for God's sake, don't try to reform me. That's going to be a tough one. So we really have to imbibe this idea that change is going to be difficult, whether it is within the government or outside. We need to explore new territory.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raghavan. My next question is also to you. Time and again, we keep talking about how do we improve the ease of doing research in our country. especially at the position which you hold in Government of India, would you like to give some, top of the line 3-4 suggestions? What do we need to do? Because you have been a practitioner yourself at the lab level as well as now at a policy level. So what do we need to do? I'm sure some baby steps have been taken. It's not that those are not getting taken. But what radical changes we could bring in if we were to give our research ecosystem has to take a quantum leap in near future, Dr. Raghavan?
Okay, so there are some things which are good in our structures, let's not refer to that. But the parts we need to change is the way our research agencies function internally. They need to be more cohesive and have a comprehension of what's happening rather than competence on every single project, which is running in its own way. There's strong attempts to change that, and I hope that happens. One striking example of, there are many examples, I should say few examples of things working well. Those examples should be learned from and improved on. The India Alliance is one in biology, but similar kinds of structures in engineering and mathematics would be very valuable. Some institutions do much better, and we should learn from them. What can we learn from those institutions? And those institutions which can navigate the complexity of our ease or difficulties in doing science have leadership which is paying attention to this and constantly giving feedback. It is a pain, and that's the way life is. Thermodynamically, entropy will take over unless you fight it back. And both the institutional feedback in addition to individual feedback is important. Otherwise, if there's no feedback to government drifts into processes which don't match with the culture of what we need. And so for this interaction is very important, and it must come from below too. It can't just come from a group of people saying this needs to be fixed. It's then a painful job saying, okay, how does it need to be fixed? Can 6 of us get together, talk to a specific person or persons dealing with this problem, sort it out. It'll be sorted out 80%. 3 months later, it'll slip back 20%. Then you have to go back and do this. It's an endless job. So my feeling is that scientists in the country, until we are much more mature and a bigger science power, need to do 2 things. One, make sure that, like Manu talked about in China, that science spreads, whatever the budget we have, it spreads across the country. That ease of doing science is something we constantly address. And the third thing, related to the first point on spread, is have meetings and workshops in every single area for our universities and colleges. They need to be exposed to research and drive that. And, whether it's government money or some other money, we need to raise that. The total number of, I did a calculation a few days ago, the total number of meetings and workshops in the marine biological laboratories and Cold Spring Harbor related only to biology is more than the total number of workshops across all sectors in the country. Now, this is a bit of a problem. This is a problem which we need to fix bottom up. And we can find resources, make a virtue of the internet requirements which we sadly face today, but still connecting science to a broader set of people in some way, quality side. By the way, this meeting which we are in right now has got an extraordinary set of speakers. I was looking through the speakers. That's the kind of breadth and depth in every topic, which a kid in a college needs to also have accessible afterwards in YouTube with a translation in their language. And then, a mentor urging them to look at that. So these kinds of things are tough. They're not easy to do. They're easy to say, but the ease of doing interactions and all of this can change things quite well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raghavan. Some very useful suggestions, and yes, much of what happens in ISF will be there on YouTube, and and thank you, thanks to your office. This time we have also engaged with the scientist community in the government labs and institutions, and some of them based on their interests, hopefully the next 2 weeks, they would also attend some of the sessions because there's some very, very good iconic speakers from all over the world. Thank you. So now I come to my last question, and that will be some kind of a very, very quick, very, very bullet points kind of answers what I said in the beginning from each one of you. Let me start with Dr. Jyotsna, Dhawan, and I'll come to Dr. Raghavan here at the end. What are your top two definitely? And if you really want to have a third one, top three ideas, how could we reform STEM, both from an education, either from an education or from a research career perspective in the country? Some very actionable, very doable ideas, some of them Dr. Raghavan gave, a lot of you gave, and also, for example, why we don't have a serious community of, or even a category for postdoc students, barring a few exceptions here and there, or, what she called as, the lab scientists, staff scientists, so these kind of things. So, Jyotsna, over to you.
So,
very short. My request is, because we want to.
I'm going to be very short, and I'm going to say the ideas are all out there. Okay, there's no dearth of ideas. Everyone is talking about these ideas, and they're all doable. But we need a change of attitude to really getting them done. And part of that is something that Vijay discussed, which was changes in institutional culture, right? Where leaders within institutes take feedback and actually draw upon people within their own community to actually spread these ideas and do it with some energy without making formulas of all of these things and simply ticking boxes because your funding agency is asking you for them. I think it needs engagement from all of us. One simple thing, within all our elite research institutes, we still have two cultures. We talk about outreach and we're going to run down the road and talk to, some school or college that's out there. How many of us actually have programs for our non-scientific staff, for our administrative staff, for our housekeeping staff? We are not egalitarian instinctively. So we need to change that. So I think it's a matter of attitude.
Thank you. Yes, culture, attitude, these are big showstoppers, no doubt, But, I think I really liked what you talked about, establish a feedback mechanism. That was very, very important, if things have to change. So over to you, Karishma, the top 2-3 ideas, what we need to reform.
I'll tell you what my wish list is, and it is a wish. Of course, there are many things that will go into making it successful. But I would say that we early career scientists, at least we can, let the ball start with us. Let us bell the cat. We stop thinking of it as a project, a publication, a manuscript, and we actually start thinking of how are we contributing to the science ecosystem in India. I think I would, and of course, this will be met with a lot of pushback saying, but I need my job, I need my grant, I need to pay my bills. But nevertheless, let's broaden our thought towards contributing to science in India. I think that would be my wish.
All right. So how, there should be some mechanism to, to facilitate that, how the young scientists contribute to building the right kind of science ecosystem.
Sure. And there are many ways. I can give a few easy examples. Maybe an internship with a student from a local college. That could be one way to start. Maybe starting an outreach arm for your research group. Maybe just communicating your published science in a platform like India Bioscience that more people can read. So just let's take the next step. Let's think of the next step and take it.
Thank you. Thank you, Karishma. Manu, over to you.
All right. If it's a wish list, I can go on for a very long time. But I'll try to keep it short. Everything that has been mentioned, or that I actually wanted to do, or wanted to say rather, has mostly been mentioned. But to Karishma's point, I definitely agree, right? It definitely has to start with us in terms of, if we want to sort of do the outreach, then we have to be the ones doing the outreach, right? And then simple mechanisms, right? Write a blog post, get together with 5 other people and do a online summer school, right? And just sort of try and engage kids, try and engage students from tier 2, tier 3 colleges who might sort of just get interested. And this is something that we've been trying for the past 5 years or so. And then these are relatively easy to do, especially given the COVID times and given the online modes of engagement. It just needs a few people to sort of come together, which essentially again boils down to early career researchers kind of, at least in their head, start rethinking what the incentive mechanisms are. And that kind of ties in to some extent towards institutional incentive mechanisms as well, right? I mean, as academics, our career progression is kind of dependent on how many papers we publish, how many grants we get, how many PhD students we graduate, so on and so forth. There is no incentive mechanism that is built in by the institution. So some by the funding agencies, but not really, where, we are incentivized for doing that summer school, going out to the nearby school and giving a talk, right? Or going by to the nearest degree college and trying to engage with the students. There's no incentive mechanism for that. And that needs to sort of change, right? I mean, everything being said and done, we are humans, we are driven by incentive mechanisms. And being an academic is also a job. So we need to sort of align the incentive mechanisms along those lines. And just very quickly, since this is a wish list and it's not very actionable, but I think a lot of the problems that sort of are there in the system, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, all of that is because we have somehow built in a large amount of trust deficit at all levels, right? The funding agencies don't trust the PIs don't trust the institution doesn't trust the academics, so on and so forth, right? And again, I don't know where to get started for kind of removing that, but that is, sort of like a meta goal that I sort of see being achieved in, I don't know, in my career, let's say, and I'll be optimistic about that.
Thank you, Manu. I mean, just to quickly reiterate, we were having a long chat with Dr. Sanjay Sharma of MIT, and he said even in the US, a very large percentage of research that actually happens is not a very productive research. Much of it is research for research's sake. So, when I was trying to learn something for their experiences, which would be applied here in India, that's what he said. And in fact, the percentage that he attached to it, he said it's not to be quoted, but it's very, very high. Thank you. Over to Dr. Gagandeep Kang.
Thank you. So I will disagree with Jyotsna in that I think measurement and metrics matter. And at least initially, that people will tick boxes because the boxes are there to be ticked. But over time, change does happen by setting goals. So if you look, for example, at the Wellcome's policy on public communication of science, it does make a difference when you have to fill out an entire long session about how you're going to do this. And I can tell you that with my PhD students, the ones who are registered with the Sri Chitra Institute for Science and Technology, they are required to go to schools and give a talk about their thesis topic. And most of them come back very excited about the interactions that they've had with school students. So sometimes metrics do matter and we need to think sensibly about those. The other thing to think about is mentorship. We don't teach mentorship. We don't have formal programs for mentorship. And I think those are important. You need to create a structure. Most people don't even understand what being a mentor really means, the responsibilities that you have to take on. And if you are to maintain an environment that nurtures the next generation of scientists, I think it's critical. The third and last area, I think, is in our online world, we really need media training. When I was doing these pieces on misinformation, I'm physically very awkward. I can't sing or dance for nuts. But these people kind of walked you through. They looked at you and then they said, okay, we can put in these, I don't know, all kinds of stuff into the video so that it looks better and we hide how awkward you are. So I think it does make a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Kang. I agree. So many years with the tech industry, I have also learned that something that you can't measure, you can't manage, leave aside, monitor it. So I think metrics do become important. Yes, sometimes people abuse metrics and data is put for the sake of it. But over a period of time, you can't endlessly keep on abusing the system. The classic example is ease of doing business. I mean, since the measurements started, a lot of efforts started. Some critics may say that, oh, not much has changed. But if you talk to the business community, not that all problems have been sorted, but there has been some improvement and our rank on ease of doing business has improved as a country to 100 plus something to 63rd. And, last year it didn't happen because of COVID. I'm sure it could have improved further. So thank you. So last but not the least, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, over to you. Of course, during your earlier answers, you did mention a few tangible things, but in fact, several tangible things. But would you like to take this opportunity to suggest, some key reforms in the STEM education as well as, from a career perspective, the entire landscape to improve and change?
Thank you. I won't reiterate much of what's been said or any of what's been said, much of which I agree with. What I'll try and point out is a fundamental problem facing science and technology all over the world, which is the conflation of precision with accuracy. And the idea, therefore, that, I've published so many papers, done this much outreach, done that, stood on a pen, rode a horse, now promote me. And this is, turning upside down the importance of measurement. We need to see those as outcomes of the work we do, not as the goals of what we need to do. Now, that has resulted, whether it is in funding agencies or institutions or scientists all over the world, trying every which way to game the system, to get more resources, increase rankings, have, more distinguished faculty and so on. It's gone berserk all over the world. We need to recalibrate, and we need to recalibrate in our context, because the problems we face today with reference to climate change, biodiversity, the environment, sustainable development, require basic fundamental research and application across the spectrum in our context to be driven. And therefore, we must reevaluate these metrics in substantial ways. That's number one. Second point, generally, in anything we do, whether it is our interaction with our institutional heads or funding agencies or with our students and so on, you can outline parameters A, B, C, D, which are needed to get done to get the outcome done. A small inefficiency in each of them results in the final product being, abysmally low in efficiency coming out. This is the way in linear parts, small inefficiencies, multiply. So you need something which is called a forcing function to reset the steps which are not going. And these are external advice which you need to get and say, look, this is not the way it can be done. It needs to be fixed. So both those kinds of forcing functions, when things are not going well, whatever our interactions are, science or our administration, they need to be there as much as feedback loops of various kinds. So that's absolutely critically important. I'd like to end by saying that, these are all very tough things to do. It's not easy to, look at them and solve them, but we must move away from individuals being measured to institutions being measured. Institutions must have the room to decide, here are 5 people amongst my faculty who I know are not going to pay off in the next 5 years. They're going to pay off 10, 15 years from now. I will not apply these metrics to them. I will still promote them. That institutional courage and leadership, if that's not there, no amount of processes and rules and regulations will fix it. But the institutions at the same time must be measured very strongly on what its outcome is. If you are the National Institute of Immunology, what have you contributed to immunology? It doesn't matter whether you got 7 people who are theoretical physicists inside. Don't regulate them at that level, but make sure that they are the National Institute of Immunology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan. I think it's very, very important what you said, that measurements need to exist more at the institutional level rather than the individual level, and how aligned they are to solve the bigger challenges of the nation. Thank you, Dr. Raghavan. We'll take a few questions. Some of the questions that I can straight away read is that how important it is to bring changes in the way our institutions are managed. There seem to be some cracks in the way leaders are picked up or groomed. Of course, how they are managed, Dr. Raghavan did mention that in one of his answers, during the panel discussion. But he said, this question says that some cracks are there in the way the leaders are picked up and groomed. So this is not for any particular panelist, but anybody can answer that.
Which results in strong silence from everybody.
Oh.
So, azithromycin, what strength?
Well, I think I can certainly speak for the fact that I am at a university system. Maybe can I take the stage?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I'm sticking my neck out here because this is a question nobody was ready to answer. But well, I mean, certainly, I completely agree. As long as you are promoting and giving leadership positions based on date of joining, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. I'm sorry, as early career researchers, we simply can't reconcile ourselves to this, where somebody's just being, going up the track based on when they joined and no other parameter. Unfortunately, even predatory journals now have been given some value. So definitely, at least in the university systems, there's a complete rehaul required. So how and where to start, it's like we're running around in circles sometimes, but that there is a rehaul needed beyond our institutes of eminence and other research institutes, absolutely, when it comes to building a leadership pyramid. Yes.
All right. Thank you. The next question I have is something very tangible somebody has asked. Does providing higher scholarship with terms, with a fixed term to work in India, let's say for next 5 years or so after their PhD or postdoc, a better idea to retain the scholar in the country? Anybody would like to volunteer?
I can answer. I can attempt to answer that.
Sure, Jyotsna.
I've just recently moved to the India Alliance, which one of the major programs of the India Alliance is just that. And that is identifying early career researchers who have, just finished their PhD so that you give them strong support and have them work within India. Now, I think those are wonderful programs and we are not doing enough of it, and we need to multiply those kinds of programs. Some institutes have actually taken this upon themselves to identify excellent PhD students and support them on a path to independence, which I think is very important. For example, the National Center for Biological Sciences does this with a strong career fellowship, improvement program for early career fellows. But, I don't think it's actually such a terrible thing to have a person go anywhere else in the world to do a postdoc and come back, I think it's actually important because there are learnings that you have not just from your exposure to science in a wonderful lab, which may be here or anywhere on the globe, but there are also cultural learnings. And I think that those actually leaven our environment. So I'm not too worried about people going anywhere in the world for a postdoc, so long as we have good programs back here to be able to attract people and to enable them once they come back. And also that we don't create a situation where our institutes feel that the stamp of a postdoc from outside the country is a requirement for career progression. So I think that too has to change. But, these things are starting to change, but not nearly enough.
Yeah, thank you, Jyotsna. The next question I have is, the quality of faculty and teachers is perhaps pivotal to generate quality students. How do we ensure that the best talent comes to teaching profession and enable them grow continuously? Learning is a lifelong exercise, which doesn't seem to apply to the teaching community in the country. So, what we, and again, a larger question, what we as a country are doing to attract the best-in-class people to opt for a career in academics. This question, of course, somebody may say that this applies to the education sector and less to science and technology. But given his wide experience, may I take the liberty of posing this to Dr. Raghavan? Yeah.
Oh dear. I also noticed your next speaker who's speaking on a slightly more emergency topic is already with us. So I guess we should finish fast.
Yeah. So by 3 minutes, we'll wind up surely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your question, Jayant? Sorry.
So this was that the quality of faculty.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So when the ISERs were expanded and then the IITs were expanded, this was a refrain that we shouldn't do those because we won't get quality faculty members. Now, part of this has validity, the aims, for example, right? Where will we get our directors, of quality faculty members, and so on? Part of this is valid because the sudden boom was not expected and we didn't see this as an opportunity and train people. Part of this is also a bit of elitism that, good faculty members are people like us, and unless we train them over a 100-year period, we're not going to populate these institutes with good teachers. That's rubbish. There are many, many kinds of good faculty members, and there is a significant fraction of them who will do really well when thrown at the deep end of the pool. Next point, which Gagandeep mentioned, we have a significant fraction of young people, not just to go to elite institutions. People are driven by the thirst for and the excitement of science and for getting a job. The first is not absent. And these people love to learn. It's just amazing. You go to, our metros, you see little fire in the belly. You go to a small town, it's just incredible, whether it is science, skilling, engineering, whatever, the desire of people to be pointed in the right direction and do stuff. So many of our teachers and faculty members need just to be like, monks sitting on top of the hill and just not say too much. That will help a lot, and just point in some random direction and the kids will do great. And of course, there are others who are really valuable as teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan. And I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for your wonderful inputs at this very important panel discussion, because, doing up the entire platform for STEM education and careers is fundamental to improving science and technology in India, the landscape in India. And I won't even attempt to summarize, because the gamut of discussion has been so wide and such interesting inputs. We have the recording available. We'll consolidate that and share, the final list of ideas that emerged. Not just the minutes of the meeting kind of a thing, but some of the ideas that emerged during this last 1 hour and 15 minutes. And thank you so much for being with us. We really value, an organization like FAST can only succeed, if we have such value-added discussions with very, very eminent people like you, who collectively create a science and technology ecosystem in the country. Thank you so much. This inaugural panel discussion of the India Science Festival has gone off very well. And may I request each one of you and your respective scientist community in your organizations or the academic community in your organizations to join this depending upon their areas of interest. Thank you so much. We really value your very, very important and value-added inputs. Thank you so much.
Hey!